Good morning. This is Disha Bagchi for ThePrint, and we're back with Lieutenant General Retired H.S. Panag to discuss his column from this week on LAC. India's options are limited. Modi should make the most of the BRICS opportunity. Welcome back, General. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, Disha, it's always a pleasure to discuss my column with you.
So in this week's column, you explore how recent summits like BRICS, G20 have broken the ice between India and China since the Galwan clashes in 2020, and how talks are now slowly shifting towards de-escalation. So to begin with, how do you think meetings along the sidelines of such forums, such as BRICS, G20, East Asia Summit, have contributed to brokering talks of de-escalation between India and China?
So far, there is a certain amount of opacity as far as what has transpired at the BRICS summit in Johannesburg on 24th of August. But what is clear is that President Xi and Prime Minister Modi did have a meeting, whether it was a pull-off or whether it was an informal meeting, or there was a conversation, or whether it was a formal meeting. It's not clear. There's a slight different version given by both the countries. While our foreign secretary said that both leaders have agreed that we need to hasten up disengagement and de-escalation, the Chinese side did not mention all this, and they simply said that we must view that the border problem is a smaller problem as far as the bigger relationship between India and China is concerned. This is the well-stated Chinese position that put the border question on the back burner and improve our relations, and that will get resolved by itself. Whereas India has been saying that unless the tension on the border is reduced or stopped, the relations cannot be normalized. And there was a curious outcome. The Chinese side claimed that this meeting was at the request of Prime Minister Modi. Our foreign secretary, our foreign ministry was quick to counter that by saying that there was a long-standing request from the Chinese side for a formal meeting. Now, be that as it may, but it has certainly broken the ice. As far as this is concerned, there has been active activity on the military negotiations. First, the corps commanders that met on 13th and 14th August. Then 18th onwards, the divisional commanders and lower commanders have been meeting, and I believe the meetings are still continuing to finalize the final agreement that is going to take shape as far as the disengagement and de-escalation is concerned. I think we are well on our way. We could well hear about what has been finally decided either before the G20 meeting, or probably when the Prime Minister and President Xi meet on the sidelines of G20, it may get announced at that time.
In the column, you also mention how over the past 3 years, India and China have been stuck in a strategic stalemate in the LAC, along the LAC in eastern Ladakh. So why do you think now both the countries are moving towards de-escalation?
The Chinese strategic aim was that at the macro level, they wanted to assert their hegemony over India. And in the military terms, it meant that they wanted to re-secure the 1959 claim line, which they, as per their version, India has been crossed over the years and been patrolling across it over the years. And they wanted to deter us from developing our border infrastructure. Now, achieving strategic surprise, the Chinese did achieve to re-secure the 59 claim line in all areas except the Indus Valley, where I have mentioned before also that because of habitation, the Chinese have left it alone. But they could not achieve their macro strategic aim of asserting their hegemony or asserting their will over India, because India did not capitulate. We did not accept what the Chinese had done. In turn, we reacted by deploying equal number of forces, if not more. And then, while all this was still going on 29th and 30th, night of 29th and 30th August, we went and secured the Kailash Range. Now, this restored our, military reputation, and both sides came face to face with each other, and almost eyeball to eyeball at most places. So now, thereafter, it led to torturous negotiations over the next, 2 years and 6 months, and there has been a sort of agreement in north of Pangong Tso, where the buffer zone has been created between Finger 4 and Finger 8 on the Kailash Range, in Galwan Valley at PP patrolling point 14, and in the Kugrang Valley at patrolling point 15, 16, 17, and 17 Alpha. So in these areas, buffer zones have been formed. The buffer zones north of Pangong Tso and on the Kailash Range are equidistant. That means that we patrolled up to Finger 8, Chinese patrolled up to Finger 4. So it's neutral. And but in Galwan Valley and in the Kugrang Valley, that is PP patrolling point 15, 16, 17, 17 Alpha, they are largely on our side. China has refused to negotiate on Depsang Plains. They have said that no, these are not negotiable, and as well as south of Demchok in Charding and Ninglung Nala. So this is what happened. Now, what was the end result? End result was that the Chinese could not claim victory and go back. And real politics, in the sense that prestige of the nations did not allow both sides to mutually pull back. Or for the last 3 years, neither side wants war. To change what has happened on the ground, we have to fight a limited war below the nuclear threshold. The uncertainty of the outcome of a limited war, if a limited offensive of China is stalemate, it is defeat for a superior power. So it deters China from starting a limited war. At the same time, the kind of differential that exists between military differential that exists between India and China, India also is wary of starting any kind of a conflict or doing a quid pro quo. And both are nuclear armed nations. Beyond a certain point, nuclear brinkmanship will come into play. So what was prevailing up to now was then a strategic stalemate. China doesn't achieve its macro strategic aim, and at the same time, neither has India got its complete territory back. I mean, which the Chinese have this thing. We have managed buffer zone through negotiations, but Depsang and south of Demchok are still, disputed, and there's no resolution. But here I must say one thing, that this stalemate lasts only as long as the confrontation remains.
Right.
Now, to what extent any side has lost face or lost territory or lost control over territory, it will only become clear once we get the details of the agreement. But
right.
Having said that, since China had secured the 1959 claim line, it has denying us access to almost 600 to 800 square kilometers in Depsang Plains by camping at the crossroads and not allowing us to patrol to patrolling point 10, 11, 12, and 13. And in other places, of course, buffer zones have been managed. And south of Damchok, again, China has refused to budge. So what I'm trying to say is that possession is 9/10 of law.
Right.
So China is in possession of these areas, or we have got buffer zones. So China will negotiate from a position of strength.
Yes.
It is in a stronger position as far as the diplomatic negotiations are concerned.
Right. So given this current position where you say that China in some sense has an upper hand, why do you think India is trying to, in a sense, push for the process of de-escalation, especially from the center? What do you think the BJP stands to benefit given the general elections next year?
See, it is dangerous for two nations which are nuclear armed to have massed armies on the borders. And this confrontation has been going on for 3 years. Luckily, post the Galwan incident, we have not had any kind of, kinetic energy action or any kind of other major incident, has not taken place. But it can happen anytime. So when two armies confront each other, it's a dangerous situation, and it is logic says and real politics say that this crisis should be diffused. So that is, of course, a point of theory. Now, coming to what were the motivators or the drivers for this? The need for this kind of a thing. Now, one is at the macro level, if we see that the Chinese economy is 5.5 times that of India, and the Chinese military budget is 3 times that of India. So it's in terms of just budgets alone and the GDP, it is a superior power by all standards, and of course technologically it is far superior. Now, India needs time to uplift its economy. We are a 3.7 trillion economy, and Chinese are a 18 trillion economy. And unless we raise our economy to about $15 trillion, and which will take about 2 decades, you cannot be in a position to challenge China. And we reform our armed forces along with it. So one is that in a broader sense, that India can bide its time, and like China did from 1980 to 2005, almost. And then as your economy picks up, as your armed forces get reformed, then you can assert your power. In the immediate context, this G20 summit, is a very important thing for India to find its rightful place in the Committee of Nations, and also to cement its status as a new power on the world scene. The presence of President Xi at the summit, and then his cooperation to have a consensual statement or a declaration, is extremely important. And to that end, this is one of the motivators as to why we have gone, probably accepted to negotiate a kind of a settlement. Another factor is that, as per the perception of the BJP, it is well on way to get re-elected in the 2024 parliamentary elections. An ongoing confrontation with a certain amount of mischief from China in terms of a punitive, high technology-driven action to destroy a post or in any other form, it can queer the pitch for the elections. And so, again, agreement that can be sold as victory, for which the party is famous in the sense that even when earlier, if there was a setbacks on the border through obfuscation and through rhetoric, people have been convinced that the government has actually done well. So if there's an agreement, even if it is not that much in our favor, then it can be sold as as victory to the people, which will again help in the elections. Now, as far as China is concerned, now China, one of course is that China also could not achieve its overall strategic aim of absolutely subduing, the Indian will, due to the pressure on the borders. Then, China was trying to assert its hegemony over India, it was trying to sort of shape India's international behavior in terms of its emerging alliance with the United States, in terms of its assertive role in the Asia Pacific, and also India's emergence as a power. So China was trying to shape it and trying to say that you are a junior partner, and to that extent, the pressure was being asserted. Now, the effect on ground was the opposite. One is that India has gone in for an alliance. Then we have got the Quad agreement. We are doing defense exercises with Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and so with all this, China also feels that it is having the opposite effect. And in case China lowers the pressure on the border, it will enable India to retain its strategic autonomy, which otherwise it's an Indian policy. India has stated that even when we are dealing with the United States, that irrespective of the close friendship, close alliance, or in whatever form it is, but India as a nation, of such a huge nation and as an emerging power, it will retain its strategic autonomy. It's not going to play itself as a small minor alliance partner of the United States or anybody else for that matter. So that Chinese feel that once the pressure is off on the border, then India would be more assertive as far as its strategic autonomy is concerned. So these were some of the drivers that have pushed India and China into a sort of a negotiation for the settlement.
Right. So now that we've discussed sort of what the drivers were to reach a settlement or an agreement in the future, what do you think this agreement would look like? What would be some of the details that you think would come out?
See, I mentioned to you that at the moment it is unclear as to what shape the agreement would take. But I have to reiterate that in all likelihood, most of us may not like it. It will be an agreement on the Chinese terms. Why on Chinese terms? Or I would say China would have an edge as far as the end result is concerned. Why do I say that? It is because if you allow yourself to be preempted and strategically surprised on the borders, which we allowed China when they walked into, from finger 8 to finger 4, they came across in Galwan, and they have came across to crossroads in Depsang and prevented our movement to a large chunk of Depsang plains, and also in Demchok. We were surprised. So these areas are in de facto possession of China, even with buffer zones. Buffer zones don't allow you to go there. So on ground, in terms of terrain, the Chinese have a distinct edge. But having said that, since there are certain legacy issues as the government has been trying to justify Depsang Plains and Demchok, that these are legacy issues. They were there even before 2020. And there have been many arguments put forward by various analysts as well as by so-called government sources that the LAC was never really has not been fully demarcated. It is a fact. It is not demarcated border. So who knows who was here or who was there? But the reality is that the Chinese have been very clear. The 1959 claim line which was advocated by Chow En-lai on 7th November 1959, is the line which they feel is the line of actual control. And it is India that had crossed over in these areas which they occupied in 2020. So it is India is at fault, and this is the line. And to be fair, the Chinese did not cross this line in 1959. And even now, they have not crossed the 1959 claim line. Though at times they give out different versions, variations of the 1959 claim line, because the points of the 1959 claim line in terms of longitude and latitude, which were given to India in 1960 during negotiations, there were 5 rounds of negotiations held between Indian officials and the Chinese. They gave us the points, but these points are so widely separated, sometimes at places by 50 to 60, even 100 kilometers. So in between, it is very difficult to say as to where the line has gone. So they have been doing this at times. Like I feel that in the Kugrang Valley, they have utilized this particular ploy to do that. So whatever agreement comes out, it will be linked to the 59 claim line.
Right.
And I feel that if we can negotiate an equidistant buffer zone in the Depsang Plains, in the sense that the Chinese used to patrol up to crossroads, and we used to patrol up to patrolling point 10, 11, 12, and 13. So if this entire area becomes a crossroad, it does imply that we cannot patrol over 600 to 800 square kilometers of our territory in Depsang Plains. But so can't the Chinese, because Chinese were also patrolling up to crossroads earlier. So in that sense, if we can convince the Chinese, have not agreed to it so far. In fact, they want the buffer zone to go further back. In fact, which even goes across the Darbuk DBO road. But if we can negotiate this particular buffer zone, and if we can negotiate something similar south of Demchok, it's a very small area, then I think it's a fair agreement for India, in the sense that there are buffer zones. We have not conceded the 59 claim line, and it can still be negotiated. And also, we must insist, though there is a de facto demarcation has taken place, because China has got no other claim left in as far as Eastern Ladakh is concerned. After all this, they have left the Indus Valley alone. So no other claim is left. De facto demarcation has taken place, because buffer zones are all marked now, and other areas there's no disagreement. I mean, as far as the Chinese are concerned, or even our own view. So with this, I would say it's a fair agreement. And this agreement, if it does take place, either its broad contours may be announced at the G20 summit, and later the details will probably come out. It can pave the way for a long-term settlement on the lines which was suggested at that time, or even a long-term interim settlement, agreeing to disagreeing kinds, of the 59 claim line as modified with the buffer zones now, probably a line running through the center of the buffer zones rather than what the Chinese claim. And the McMahon line in the northeast, it could become another a more concrete interim agreement. And so that is for negotiations to decide as to how this whole thing will shape up. But one thing is certain, that there will be de-escalation and possibly a de-induction of the additional forces may also take place. And this will emerge, as I said, at the G20 or a little later.
Right. Well, thank you, General. I think you brought up some very interesting points about, firstly, why India and China are looking at de-escalation now, particularly how these global forums have played a role in breaking the ice, as well as where both India and China stand when it comes to coming together to form some sort of agreement, as you mentioned, an interim long-term agreement as well, and what sort of stipulations we can expect. So for viewers interested in reading the full article by General Panag, the link to it will be in the description below. Thank you, and we will see you next week.